Hey guys, welcome to or back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Jess, and if you're old here, hi, it's been a hot minute, but we are back with a December wrap-up. So, if you remember, it's been a while. November was a very bad reading month for me. I did not read basically any of my TBR. I think I read maybe 1 or 2 books. So, for December, I had 11 books on my TBR, and I didn't get to all of them. I only got to 5. So, we're going to be going over the 5 books that I did manage to get through today, and yeah, let's just get into it. So the first book I was able to complete in December was Oathbringer by Brandon Sanderson. So this is book 3 of the Stormlight Archives, and I really can't explain to you what this book is about because it's book 3, and this book is hard. This whole series is really hard to explain, but I do remember I heard somebody say it. I don't remember who it was, so if you know, please drop their name down in the comments so I can properly give them credit. But someone said, and I listened to it, and it said they described this book as a group of knights has to rise up and come together to stop the apocalypse. And that basically sums it up. So yeah, that's what I'm gonna go with for a summary of this because I have no other way to explain it. These books are super large, they're super chunky, they're all over 1,000 pages in this series. This is book 3. I'm pretty sure he's gonna come out with 10 eventually, but this, the 4th one just came out, I think last month, but I love this fantasy series. It's one of my favorites. Brandon Sanderson as an author, he writes just amazing worlds and amazing characters, and you fall in love with all of them, and there's so many of them in this world, and you keep getting introduced to new ones throughout every single book, and it's just super amazing. I will say they are huge, and a lot of people can be intimidated by that because they are gigantic, but an option is the UK versions are actually in parts, so there's a part 1 and a part 2 for each book, so they are about 500 to 600 pages instead of over 1,000. So that is always an option if you are intimidated by the size of this book, but it is big. However, I will say it feels like you fly through it because there's just so much action and there's always something happening. This is a book where there's a lot of, like in most fantasies, you have that period in it where it's traveling, and that normally feels like it takes forever to read. However, in this book, because it switches perspectives through chapters, while one group of people is traveling, another group will be doing something that's more interesting, and so you're still getting that sense of something's going on even though you are doing the journeying of the story. So that's always a good thing. And yeah, I love this story. I love this book. I gave this a 5 out of 5 stars, as I'm pretty sure I've done with every single book that I've read in this series so far. And I recommend it to anybody that loves fantasy. If you love war, politics, drama, there's romances in here. It's got everything. It's got spirits. It's got a whole nother dimension. It's got like all kinds of stuff. And if you love any of those things, I definitely recommend this book. It is super big, so maybe start with one of Brandon Sanderson's other books if you're just looking to get into Sanderson. I would not recommend starting with this one, but if you are a high adult fantasy lover, this is the book for you. The second book that I picked up in the month of December was The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V. Schwab. This was my book of the month for October this year, and I finally got around to reading it, and I loved it. So this follows a girl named Addie LaRue who's in this old French village in the 1600s, and she is about to be married off to this man by her family, and she decides that she doesn't want that life, and she doesn't want to do that. She wants to explore, she wants to adventure, which is not normal for a girl in these times. However, she has this friend who's this old lady, kind of like a grandmother figure, who tells her to pray to the gods and they will help her. However, make sure you never pray to the gods that answer after dark. Well, Addie is desperate, and she runs into the forest, and she doesn't realize what time it is, and she prays to the people who answer after dark. As you can imagine, this does not go very well for her. So she makes a deal with the figure that emerges that she wants to become immortal. However, his side of the deal is that no one will remember her, and she cannot leave her mark on anything. She can't write, she can't paint, she can't draw, she can't break things, she can't take things, and no one remembers her. As soon as she's out of their line of sight, all memory is gone of Addie LaRue. And she can't use her real name. She has to make up fake names, and her name is never like said again, and she can't even say it. So as you can imagine, this is super lonely, and she really, the only person in her life that's like steady and constantly knows her is the person she made the deal with, who we come to know as Luke. And she goes through 300 years of existence with him being the only person that actually knows her, until one day she walks into a bookstore in New York City and a boy remembers her. So as you can imagine, it's super lonely. It's super great. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. It is my favorite book of the year, and I could not get enough of it. I read it so quickly. It was just amazing. Her writing in here is like lyrical and poetic, and so it flows in a way that just makes you just read it so fast. It's ridiculous. Like, you fly through the whole book. You love it every step of the way. It's beautiful. It's amazing. The characters are great. You fall in love with all of them. And it's just, oh, it's so much fun. It's so great to see Addie kind of progress and see how she comes. We also follow dual timelines in this book. So we follow Addie after she meets him, and there she's in New York to try to figure out what's going on. But we also follow her throughout the years previous to when she meets this guy. And we see her kind of like realize the limits of her curse and kind of find ways around some of them and kind of put her mark on the world in ways that you might not think she can. I think what really made me just fall in love with this book was the ending. I spent this entire book thinking, man, this is a great story, but it's predictable, and I know exactly what's going to happen. I know exactly how this is going to work out, who she's going to end up with, what I want to happen, this is what it's going to be. And then V. Schwab just took the last 50 pages and flipped the whole thing around on me and just made it go completely crazy, and I loved it. I loved how much it just left me awestruck, and I had no words for it. It was just amazing. It was beautiful. It was well done. It was well crafted. She spent so many years crafting this book and going through everything and just making it so amazing, and I loved it every step of the way. I will say there is a definite trigger warning for loneliness. If you are feeling lonely, or if you are someone who normally feels lonely, you might not want to read this book, because it centers around Addie being completely lonely and depressed because of it. And yeah, I don't think that would be a good thing for you to read. But if you think you're fine with it, you go for it, you do you. But that would be my main trigger warning for this. But yeah, I recommend this for anybody who loves, it's fantasy, but it reads like a contemporary. So of course I'd recommend it to fantasy lovers, but honestly, I think if you're a contemporary lover, I think you would enjoy this as well, because it reads like a contemporary, and most of the story is like things you would find in a normal contemporary, so I definitely recommend it to people who enjoyed those. But yeah, I think everybody should read this book eventually. I think it's great. I love it. Like I said, best book of the year, probably favorite book on the list of favorite books of all time, and yeah, I loved it. Go read it. Spectacular book. The third book I completed in the month of December was The Fall by Garth Nix. It is not this entire book. This is a bind up of the first 3 books in the series, and I read the first one, so it spanned about the first 200 pages of this bind up, and I didn't like it. This was my lowest rated book of the month. I gave it 2 stars, but we follow a boy named Tal, and he's in a society where all the powers come from these things called sunstones. And each family has like a big sunstone, and then people can have little sunstones. Their family's huge, powerful sunstone went missing when his father did a couple months ago. However, this is a problem because not only is his father missing, the sunstone's missing, and the family needs this sunstone to be able to get into the place they need to go every year. And they can't because they don't have the sunstone. So as the new man of the family, his mom, who is sick, entrusts him to go and find them a sunstone in any way he can, so that their family can go on this journey with everybody else in the society, so that they can basically survive throughout the year. And yeah, that's where we find Tal. And he goes through all these links, and he's like trying to steal sunstones and trying to get sunstones and trying to win them and trying to achieve them, and everything's falling apart until eventually we just watch him get blown away to this completely other setting and completely other place, where he's lost in these snowy mountains and he meets this like warrior tribe, and there's this girl that hates him, as you can imagine, and he has to go on this complete other quest to get to the quest that he was originally on. I feel like this book jumped so much so quickly that I was just like, are you kidding me? Are we really going from here to here? And it was confusing and it was weird and it was really, really fast. But yeah, I didn't really like it. I feel like it was one of those books where everything gets solved really quickly. So like anytime Tal would have something in his way, he'd like turn around and there would be the solution. Like he needs something, like he wouldn't know something and the person that knew it would be right there. And then he'd figure something out and he'd figure out he needed something and the person who had it was right there. And he like needed to get somewhere really quickly, and then boom, there was a secret passage like as soon as he turned around. And just stuff like that, and it was just so aggravating almost that things were just coming so easily to him, because I feel like Garth Nix wanted us to really feel like how high stakes this was and how like he really needed this Sunstone, and yet it was like so bad that he needed it and it was going to be so hard to get it, and yet it was so easy for him to go through everything. Like it was just weird to me. All in all, I did like the character Mila, who is the girl that we meet once he gets to the Snowy Mountains. I loved how spunky she was, and how she just didn't take any crap, and she didn't like him, and she didn't trust him, and she was just so much fun. Her banter was amazing. But I do say that it does cut off really weirdly. So the end of this book, I can see why they put them in bind-ups of 3, because you're supposed to just keep reading the entire book as if it's just one book, I think. Because this thing is like, they're going off on this journey, and some things happen on the journey that like kind of slow them down a little bit, and then just like boom, the book ends, and you're like, whoa, why did it end there? Why didn't it just keep going? Why didn't it just make it one whole book? We don't know. But I feel like that was another reason I didn't like it. And I can see the potential of this story. And I am going to continue in the series just for the sake of continuing the series. But I think it is definitely made for younger readers. I recommend this to kids that are in like middle school, maybe even like 4th or 5th grade. It's super easy to read. It's super big, like fonts, small pages, stuff like that. So it's super fast. It definitely gives me the vibe of a children's book, where things are happening kind of more quickly, things are getting solved more easily, it's easy for a kid to read, it's something they can get into, stuff like that. So I definitely think that this is a younger person's book, and I think if I was younger, I would have liked it a lot more. But being as it was, I did not like it that much, and I did give it 2 stars. But like I said, for the sake of continuing the series, I will be continuing through at least the next 2 books because I own them. So yeah, that was this one. So the 4th book I read in December was The Diabolic by S.J. Kincaid. This is a sci-fi, and I don't normally read sci-fis, but I loved this one. So this book starts out where we meet a Diabolic named Nemesis, and a Diabolic is a person that's not a person. They are basically bred in a lab and raised to kill everything and anything that haunts their one master that they've bonded with. And this is the one person that they're supposed to be able to love, the one person that's supposed to matter the most to them in their life. And for Nemesis, this is a little girl named Sidonia, who is the same age as her, and all throughout her life, all she knows is Sidonia is the person, and Sidonia is the one that she must protect at all costs from whoever is haunting her, and whoever is hunting her, and whoever wants her dead, whoever's tried to cause her harm. Anytime that Nemesis thinks that Sidonia is in trouble, boom, that person's dead. And she is a killing machine, and she does her job well. However, one day, her dad gets in some trouble with like the head emperor of the galaxy, and so the emperor summons Sidonia to come live with him at the castle, and the mom actually sees this as him wanting to get her there just so he can kill her, and so she sends Nemesis in her place, and so Nemesis has to pose as Sidonia and go to all these political meetings and become part of the court. Even though she's been raised to kill people, she has to actually figure out how to be human. And so, as you can imagine, it's really high stakes at every turn. It's a great book. I loved it. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. I would have given it 5 stars. It just didn't have that like huge thing. I feel like at the beginning of the year I was just giving out 5 stars like crazy, and I kind of realized that, and so now I'm kind of like saving it for those like books that just leave me like, oh my gosh. But this one was super close, but it was 4 stars and I loved it. I think I normally don't like sci-fis because I don't like the space battle scenes. Like, I don't like the shooter jets and the, I don't know, them referencing Star Wars, but lightsaber battles and just gun battles, and just, I don't like a bunch of space battles basically, and no matter what they look like. And this one doesn't have those. It really doesn't have any of those at all now that I think of it. But this one is a sci-fi. It takes place in space. You're on spaceships, and it has a lot of space terminology, but it's more like a fantasy in the way that it deals with plotting and politics and drama and romances and like family dynamics and stuff like that. And so I think that's why I liked it a lot better, is because it falls more towards the fantasy side other than space. So I think that's why I like this a lot more. This book is a roller coaster, okay? Nothing is ever safe. Like, something happens that's bad at the very beginning, and then they fix it, and you're like, oh my gosh, great, that problem's out of the way, we're fine, we can go through the rest of the story now, we can deal with this, and then boom, the whole thing gets turned on its head, and like the worst possible thing you can imagine happens. But then it's like 20 pages later, and they solve that problem, and you're like, okay, we're finally over this. We're over like the main problem. We're good. We're great. We can go through the rest of the story. We can just coast through it. We're fine. And then bam, she hits you in the face with something else. And you're like, oh my goodness. So it is definitely a roller coaster of ups and downs. You love it, and then you hate it, and then you love it, and then you hate it. And it's scary, and it's amazing, and I loved it. The characters, you can never trust the characters. You don't know what they're gonna do. She took a character and halfway through this book completely changed their personality and everything that you knew about them, and it worked. Like, normally you'd think if someone completely changed a character's personality, you'd be like, whoa, what's going on? That doesn't seem logical. But she made this work, and I loved it. I loved that character. I loved what she did with them, and it was just amazing. I will say the one flaw that I had about this book was the dependency that Nemesis had with Sidonia. And I understand she's a Diabolic, and she was literally born to bond with one person and to depend on that person for her life, but I didn't like it. I feel like Nemesis starts to realize that, hey, maybe I can be human, and maybe I can have these feelings for other people, and maybe I can do my own thing. And then boom, Sidonia comes in and just like basically makes her feel like she's nothing and she's an animal and she can't have these feelings, and she's imagining them because it's not possible. And you're like, obviously it's possible. And Nemesis is like, I really think it's possible. And then she sees Sidonia and she's like, no, there's no way. And I just hate that she was so tied down and restricted, and I hate how she was like made to feel like less of herself, because it just, I don't know, it just like irked me and it made me cringe, and I didn't really like that part. But I know it was necessary, like, for her character building and for the story, and I understood why it happened. It just made me so upset, and I did not like it. I did love how this book ended. I loved how it all came together, and I look forward to how the rest of this series progresses, because I'm not really sure what they're going to do in the rest of the series, because this one kind of like wrapped up with a nice little bow. So I'm excited to see how she unwraps that and makes something new in the rest of the series. So I'll definitely be reading the rest of them. I will say there's definite triggers for like slavery, dependability. There is animal abuse in this, so if you don't like animal abuse, don't read this. I mean, not like, of course none of us like animal abuse, but if you like don't like reading about it, I would not recommend this book, but I will recommend it to people who love sci-fi. Again, with a fantasy, I think if you like fantasy, this is one that really bridges the gap between those two genres. And I think if you like any type of like politics and plotting and stuff like that, definitely check out this book. It was a good one. And the fifth and final book that I have completed so far in December was The Fountains of Silence by LaRue. This follows a boy named Daniel who is from Texas, and his father is this hotshot oil company man. And they take a family trip to Spain. It's just him and his mom and his dad, but he doesn't want to follow in his dad's footsteps. He wants to become a photographer, so he takes this trip to basically photograph things in Madrid and try to come up with a story that will win him a prize, like a money prize, so that he can pay to get himself in a journalism school and he can do what he wants to do with his life. And so he gets to this hotel in Spain, and that's where we meet Anna. And Anna is a maid who lives in poverty under communism rulers. They fall in love, and we get to see their romance, but we also are following Daniel as he's photographing things in Spain and really putting together this story of what it's like, because at this time America doesn't realize how bad Spain has it. Spain is under the communistic rule of General Francisco Franco, and everything in Spain is falling apart. People are being brutalized, the police are crazy, and some other things are definitely happening. And we kind of see Daniel stumble upon them as he's trying to win this photography contest, and so it has a mystery element to it where we follow all these main characters who are trying to figure out the same mystery, even though they don't realize it's the same mystery because they're all on like different sides of it. And it's just super interesting. It's a great dynamic to follow, and I loved it. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. I really enjoyed it. It is a romance. The romance is super important, and it's really at the forefront of this story. And so the romantic parts of this will make you smile and they'll make you happy. However, this book is not a happy book. It is dark, it is sad, it is gruesome, it's brutal, and it's really, I think I love LaRue more for making it that way, because she picks out those like important parts of history, like this one, that we don't even know existed. Like, I didn't even know this happened. I didn't know anything about Spain. And she went and found this story, and she made it into something that we can all understand. And she really just gives light to those dark and brutal times throughout history. And she does that with all of her books, which is why I think she's my favorite historical fiction author. But yeah, definitely a dark book. Don't go into this thinking, oh, it's gonna be a fun romance, because it is, but it's not, and it will like tear you apart with what's happening in here. But I love it. I love how she was able to shed light on this part of history. Like I said, I loved the romance in here. I thought the dynamics between everybody was amazing through all the characters. I loved the mystery. I loved how from the very beginning of the mystery, you can basically guess what's going on, but you get to follow all the characters and see all the evidence as they're putting the pieces together and trying to figure out what it is. And it's just cool to see like their thought processes in getting to the solving of this mystery. And yeah, I really enjoyed it. I feel like most historical fictions, for me at least, move kind of slowly and they're almost kind of boring. However, this book moved really fast, and I think it's because she also set up the chapters really short, so it just felt like you were flying through it even if you weren't. And the story was constantly moving because there was so much going on and so much that people were trying to figure out and so much new stuff being thrown in throughout it. It was just really great and I loved it. I will say I'm going to give trigger warnings for babies. There are deaths of babies in here, there's stealing of babies in here, and it was very, like I said, that's the dark aspect, and it's very disturbing, but I think it's necessary for you to read if you're ready to read it. Don't push yourself to read this if you're not ready for that kind of thing, but it's definitely something that I think people should be more enlightened about and know that it happened. But if you're not ready for it, don't read it, because it's, like I said, super dark, super brutal, and it will make you very upset. But yeah, just that, and then overall brutality, like people get beat up, people getting like whisked away in the middle of the night by the police and no one knows where they went kind of thing. And yeah, that's also in here. So just stuff that will just kind of make you cringe and just make you really think about what's going on in the world sometimes that we don't know about. But yeah, I really liked it. I will recommend this book to people who love historical fictions. If you want to know more about what happened in the past in Spain, here it is. If you want to know some things that happened in the past under communist rulers, here it is. If you just want a mystery, a really dark mystery, here's a dark mystery. And also, if you're a fan of historical romance and you don't mind the brutality of the backs of like the second story within this story, it is a pretty good historical romance. I love the romance in here. So yeah, it's definitely a book that I think you should pick up when you're ready for it. But yeah, pick it up if you want to read it, because it was really good. Like I said, 4 out of 5 stars. Totally recommend it. But like I said earlier, I did have 11 books to complete this month, and as you can see, I didn't do that. So although I am a little upset that I only got to 5 out of the 11, I will say that I'm proud of the 5 that I've read, because they were pretty good quality books aside from the fall. But yeah, they're pretty long books, they're pretty good quality books. I loved them all, I thought they were amazing, and I'm excited to read more. But yeah, these were the 5 books. I will link them all down below as always, and I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you did, like and subscribe. Comment down some books that you read in December, as I would love to know, and also let me know if you have read any of these 5 books, as I would love to know your thoughts on them, and I will see you next time in another video. Bye!